Welcome to the first Rapaport Gem Talks, a new LinkedIn Live series where we'll host industry experts tackling the hottest topics in the diamond industry. This episode of Gem Talks is sponsored by IGI. Protect your business, your clients, and the industry with IGI screening and verification services. Our topic for today is diamond screening. This is especially important given some of the recent cases of fraud involving lab-grown diamonds. Let's go over some of those examples. In December, an Italian gem lab, Gemtech, received 3 lab-grown stones holding GIA reports for natural diamonds with almost identical weight, an apparent fraud by someone in the market. Last month, IGI identified a 6-carat lab-grown diamond with a forged GIA girdle inscription for a natural diamond. Of course, failing to check and selling a stone of this kind as natural can seriously damage your reputation and open you up to lawsuits and more. This is an interesting turn of events. Detection of synthetics has improved in the past 5 years. This has enabled a shift in the narrative around lab-grown from the dangers of undisclosed mixing to whether lab-grown will become a serious category of its own and take market share away from natural. However, now we seem to be seeing lab-grown fraud raising its ugly head again. So what's the solution? To discuss this, we have 2 experts from IGI. Levy, president of IGI's North America business, and Steve Rees, IGI North America's laboratory director and a GIA graduate gemologist. In addition to his role overseeing IGI, Avi is a board member for Diamonds Do Good and mercury-free mining. Steve developed an interest in gems and jewelry during his college semester breaks when he worked for a high-end luxury retailer. After graduating, he obtained the GIA graduate gemologist diploma and began his career as a laboratory gemologist. Avi and Steve are 2 of the best people to speak with about this topic as they see the diamonds coming into the IGI and understand the importance of screening stones. Today, I will be talking with them about how important diamond screening is, the economics of diamond verification, and whether there's more to it than just the risk of undisclosed lab-growns. A few practical points. First, I wanted to apologize for the short delay to this event. Second, there will be a free piece of content from IGI available at the end of this LinkedIn Live. The download link will be shared at the end. And thirdly, we welcome your questions. If you have any, please be sure to post them in the video chat, and we will do our best to answer them. So let's begin by defining what the problem is. And let's start with Avi. Welcome to this episode of Rapaport Gem Talks, Avi.
Hi.
Great to have you here.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So, Avi, what is the problem that diamond screening is here to solve?
Well, the problem is that as the lab-grown diamond market has evolved and gotten more popular and become more mainstream, there's a lot more lab-grown diamonds on the market. And unfortunately, it opens up access for bad actors or simple mistakes of goods to be mixed in. I want to say it goes on both ends because, as we've seen, there are people who are actually trying to switch stones. And then there are your normal mistakes that can happen in any process where putting parcels together, sometimes stones can be mixed. At the jewelry setting stage, stones pop. When you're setting goods, a setter might by accident put the wrong stone back into the piece because he has, a little bit of stones that are given to him to replace, but you have to make sure that those stones are what they are supposed to be. So screening procedures and just being aware of what's going on is more important today than ever.
Right. And would you say it's got worse, Avi?
Well, it kind of goes, it ebbs and flows, right? There are times where it gets worse because we hear about it, but there are a lot of instances that we don't hear about it. We screen more diamonds and jewelry than anyone else around the world. And our labs do find, when doing the screening process, we do find things are mixed. It could be just 1 or 2 stones in a piece, or it could be more. And we go back to the vendor and we point it out to them. So is it getting worse? It's just that the opportunities are more prevalent today than they used to be because of the flow of the goods coming in.
Right, right. I understand. Steve, welcome to you too.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here too. What can you tell me about the breadth of diamond screening? How common diamond screening actually is? What sort of proportions of diamonds get screened at present?
So here at IGI, we screen all diamonds, loose and mounted. You know, sometimes it takes more than one piece of equipment to verify if the diamond is natural versus lab grown and or non-diamond material. You know, sometimes we find CZ or lab grown moissanite mixed in as well. And, you know, those are usually on the parcel ends, and it's probably just, you know, an unfortunate accident. But every loose diamond and diamond jewelry does get screened specifically to make sure it's natural versus lab grown.
Right. And do you believe that essentially every diamond in the world should be screened?
Well, yeah, especially if you're in the lab business, you want to make sure. But out there in the trade, I think it's very advisable that you know, they know what their inventory is.
Do you think this is really for either of you, Avi and Steve? Do you think there are diamonds that have good enough provenance credentials already that no further screening should be required?
Well, at some point, there is a beginning to every diamond from where it comes from. So provenance plays a part, but diamonds change hands all the time, right? There's so many different steps for a diamond that makes their journey until it gets to a consumer's hands. So there's many more chances for it to be switched or changed. So provenance is just one part. Let's not forget, right? As I said, there are so many parts to this industry. There's so many levels, there's so many points of contact that anything can happen. So why not be safe? Why not take that extra step? Make sure. You know, we're a very fast moving industry. We want things to happen quick. We want to make the sale. We want to get a consumer the piece of jewelry or the diamond that they want. But sometimes you need to take a step back just to make sure that everything is what it's supposed to be.
Right. So let's say a diamond does have, say, 6 points along the supply chain. To what extent at the moment does screening happen at all those 6 points? And do you recommend that it happens at all of those points?
To be secure, it should happen at each point. I think as an industry, we have been very good at the screening process from the beginning to the end. I know manufacturers have taken it upon themselves to invest in machines. Retailers have forced their vendors to make sure that goods get screened. Pieces that come into our lab get screened regardless. So I think it's very important that each step you take the time to make sure.
Right. So I want to ask a little bit about some of the specifics of sizes, categories. Is there a difference in terms of how easy it is to screen diamonds depending on the size and other factors like the cut?
The cuts are really not a factor for us. Definitely the smaller the size, and if it starts being more seen in mounted jewelry, that does become more difficult. But that's when, you know, unfortunately for our customers, that's when we slow down and become more diligent to make sure we're calling it properly.
Right. But let's say fancy shape. I'm aware there are some, just looking at the machines, there are some machines on the market that don't deal with, that will only screen round brilliance. Is there in general, is screening around brilliant a smoother process than screening a fancy shape?
Well, for us, we've been doing it so long, every cut is pretty smooth for us. Yes, each machine or tester does have its own limitations, cut being one of them, or size being another. That's why we don't rely on just one piece of equipment to help us make the final call.
Right, right. And how does the screening, this for either of you, Avi or Steve, how does the screening of finished jewelry, and you touched on this a bit before, but to what extent, to what extent is that more complicated than screening loose stones? I imagine it's a lot more complicated.
Right, yeah, here again, the smaller the stone, and especially once you get into melee, the harder it is. You know, sometimes then you have to zoom up really high magnification in a microscope. If you don't see any telltale signs of, you know, diamond inclusions, whether it's natural or lab grown, you know, quite honestly, we've told the client this stone needs to be removed for further testing. We're not going to guess. It's just too important for the end consumer to know what they have.
Right, right. And from the perspective of the customer, are there any categories of diamonds for which it's actually not economical to screen every stone?
That's a tough question for us to answer. I think it depends on the manufacturer, on the jewelry, on what it is. But again, don't you want to be safe? Because unfortunately, if something does go out that's not wrong, more times than not, we find in life that that's the piece that's going to get checked or assayed and might come up the wrong one. So is a reputation worth sacrificing a few dollars or time of screening? I don't think so.
So that when you're dealing, let's say we have a manufacturer that deals in very large volumes of melee, for example. Yes. I imagine this can become a very time-consuming and expensive process to screen everything. What solutions are there in place, and what methods are there in place to streamline this, to make this a more efficient process?
I think efficiency, because we've been doing it for a long time, we are efficient with it. You know, we try, you know, we have not just one person doing it 8 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week. You know, we have a dedicated team, so there's manpower involved. And, you know, fortunately for IGI, all of our clients so far, they want us to make the right call. They want every piece, even if it's a large parcel or numerous large parcels, they want us to make sure for them that each piece is called out properly, and then you know, everything is secured in a sealed bag before it leaves the lab. This way, you know, in between the lab and back to their office, there's no unfortunate accidents of something, you know, getting switched.
Right, right. And do you think that do you think that lab-grown diamonds need to be screened to ensure that there's no natural in it?
We have had clients ask us to make sure as well, because they want they want to know that all their stones are laboratory grown stones.
Yeah, I mean,
how common is a request like that?
It depends on the company, but we're seeing that more and more are just making sure, because again, they want to make sure, regardless of what they're putting in the piece of jewelry is what it's supposed to be. Some companies have bylaws, publicly traded companies, very specifically stated. If it's lab grown, it's lab grown. If it's natural, it's natural. It has to be what it is supposed to be, what they're telling you it is. So,
right, right. Just going to remind people that there is the functionality of posting questions. If you have any questions for Avi or Steve, please post them in the video chat. I'm actually going to ask one of the questions that's already come in, which is an interesting question. Someone says, I'd be interested to hear any comments regarding screening fancy color goods. We talked about fancy shapes. What about fancy colors?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And we have screened fancy colors. Most specifically requested from the New York lab is to screen fancy yellows. And we have caught a few synthetics mixed in, just as part of screening the client's parcel. So we call it out, we separate it, and we put it in 2 separate sealed bags to make sure that it doesn't leave the lab getting mixed in again.
Right. Is there any higher levels of complication for screening fancy colors for different colors, like yellows versus pink versus blues or anything like that?
Yeah, because each color usually comes with its own, chemical or atomic makeup.
Right.
You have to be a little bit more diligent in what you're looking at. It's definitely going to be more than one type of piece of testing equipment. So it does involve, a certain level of care that's probably on a different level than screening colorless and near colorless goods.
Right, right. So I wanted to, just back to my questions. I wanted to ask a little bit about just how it works. I know there's been the last couple of years, there's been a lot of talk about, well, particularly where grading happens. Like, is grading going to always happen in the lab? Will grading happen in house? How does it work with screening, and what's the potential? What's the possible future for screening? Will it be? Is it always? Is it all in lab? Is there potential to screen in house at the manufacturer, at the retailer?
Well, there are pieces of equipment out there on the market that manufacturers or retailers can purchase. Sometimes it's not always economical because these pieces of equipment are very expensive. We have noticed that sometimes at the point of sale, jewelers are using the pen testers, and the pen testers, as we've all read, usually can give some false positives of different kinds of stones. Especially, the most notable one is HPHT lab-grown diamonds testing as moissanite from time to time.
Right.
So
yeah, no, for sure. There are many high quality machines available, but just wondering whether the broader process that you offer is something that could be done in-house in the future.
In-house at a retailer's location or manufacturer?
At a retailer, at a manufacturer.
I mean, to Steve's point, it is a significant expense to make sure, because you're always going to run into stones that are the refers, right? You're not sure. Where do you go with those? What do? You need to have a different process to really, come to a full agreement on those. And those are usually found in the laboratories.
Can I actually ask you, can you tell me the story of that 6-carat lab grown that was that you identified as being well, it was submitted as natural and identified as being lab grown. What was the atmosphere like at IGI when you discovered this? I mean, can you tell me the story of that?
Well, it came in from a client who wanted to make sure of what the stone was, right? Because there were a few signs that I think led them to believe that there is something wrong here. So of course it came into the lab. They did a few different analysis on the stone, and of course they found what they found. I think it just kind of justifies what we do, to give our clients the confidence that they can send it to us and we can give them a definitive response. So
can you share with us what it was about the stone that made them ask questions?
I think it started with the inscription. Actually, if you look at the inscription, I think that was the initial telltale sign. And then there are some things that actually I cannot go into right now because of some agreements, but it started with the inscription, that's for sure.
Right. The inscription, as in the
actual
the
laser
inscription didn't quite look right.
right.
The inscription
Right.
doesn't quite look right, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Right.
And unfortunately, we're actually seeing a lot more of that recently as well. And we're questioning as to why. Why would people want to do such a thing? Either to go over the inscription, to play with the inscription. It doesn't make sense, but that's what we're here for, right? To talk about screening.
And how long did it take you to determine for sure that this stone was lab grown?
Oh, I'm not sure. Steve, do you know?
I think it took them about 30 minutes because it was a large stone and they wanted to be very careful.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I feel like you must have felt pretty kind of pleased with yourselves for making a spot like that.
That's what we do, right? So to get justification is always good. But of course we don't want to see this. It hurts our industry. It hurts the confidence. But you can't stop people from doing what they feel is right for themselves, unfortunately. We're talking about the bad actors. And over the history of our industry, unfortunately, they are out there. So I think it's important for people to know that laboratories such as IGI are out there kind of as a watchdog, right? We're behind the scenes making sure that you can have confidence in sending in your merchandise so we can tell you what it is.
Right. So I'm going to go back to another question that we got from the audience.
Okay.
It's kind of a broad question. There's probably lots of ways of answering this, but what are the limitations in the screening process?
Steve.
That's a good question. Yeah, there are limitations at every level to any responsibility. You know, here again, we touched on certain pieces of equipment. It's hard to handle fancy cuts. So you have to, you know, go to a different piece of equipment. So, you know, you try and combat deficiencies, making up for it in other areas in terms of what kind of equipment you have. You know, I think through the years, we've kind of, you know, weeded out the difficulty because we've been doing it so long. So you know, I can confidently say right now that, you know, IGI is good to go with at any level.
Yeah.
Great. Another question here. Well, I'm going to ask this anyway. You might say this isn't your field to respond, but let's give it a go. Do you see lab-grown diamonds taking over natural diamonds in the coming future, or vice versa?
Is that a screening question?
You knew that. You knew that question was going to come through at some point.
I
Sure.
mean, come on. It's a question of choice. It's not for us to answer. It's up for a consumer to answer that question to see where we're going to go with this market.
Well, thanks everyone for sending in these questions. Just going to go for one more. What percentage of the lab-grown diamonds you find mixed with natural are there by accident versus from illicit actions? That's a very interesting question.
That is a very interesting question. It's a tough one to answer. We're not here to judge. We're just here to get the results and give it to the people. You know, there are some times where we know outright that there is a fraud happening, but more times than not, I think it is by accident, you know, because of the processes and because of the changing hands. Obviously, we do see times when we can say that it's pretty specific. And even at retail level, I mean, I think there was something that happened last month or something in New York, out in Long Island. Actually, store associate was selling lab growns instead of natural, telling the consumer that it was natural. Right? I'm pretty sure that's what happened, right? On Long Island recently.
Yeah, I think I saw something like that. Yes.
So unfortunately, you know, it's opening it up to different people in different parts of our industry to do the wrong thing. So we need to combat that. We need to let the public know, the retailers know, the vendors know that there are people watching and to beware. I mean, why take a chance? So yesterday we had a very prominent wholesaler / retailer from 47th Street come up, and they brought us goods from 5/5 to 3/8. Anywhere from 100 carats to 200 carats each parcel. They just wanted to be sure because they see that it used to be a problem with mainly the smaller goods, the mellies, but the problem is increasing. It's growing. It's fifths, it's quarters, it's halves, it's 3-grainers. You know, when you open this up, unfortunately, you don't know what's going to happen on the other side, and you have to be prepared for everything to happen. Therefore, it's our job to make sure that we're up to date on what we're doing, and we're making it accessible for the industry. We've recently done a collaboration with the DMIA on 47th Street to combat this problem, to let their people know, to let their members know, and to let the trade know that you do have a place that is accessible, efficient, and competitive enough pricing-wise to make it easy for you to bring in your goods to be screened. So why not do it?
Right. Also, this is a question for me. I apologize if I missed this in the flow of information, but where does treatments come into this? As in how often is the demand for screening because of a concern that a diamond might be, for example, color treated and not disclosed?
Right. Yeah, looking for color treatments is always part of the screening process. You know, specifically on certain diamond types. We know that they're usually in the colorless to near colorless goods, you know, they can undergo the HPHT treatment process to remove some brown tinge and make the goods look whiter. It is part of the process.
Right.
But to date, we have not found any melly in New York that has been color treated.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. And just going back to some of the submitted questions, we touched on this a bit with the 6 carat stone. But someone asked, are there any visual cues that are a tip-off that a stone might be lab grown? And you mentioned with the 6 carat that it was, in that specific case, it was the dodgy looking inscription. But what can you how would you answer that question? Any visual cues that are tip-off that a stone might be lab grown?
I think for sure, if the person is looking with any kind of magnification, whether it's a jeweler's loupe or anything of higher level magnification, always be on the lookout for black inclusions. HPHT can have black metallic like inclusions. CBD lab growns can have black or grayish looking carbon remnants that look cloudy, not so much crystalline but cloudy. Things of that nature. Brown tingy stones, blue tinge stones. There are, the more you see, the more you know what to look out for in the end. So it's like anything, the more you study something, the more comfortable you're going to feel in saying, hey, this doesn't look right. It needs further investigation.
Right.
In addition to which, you'll also know who you're doing business with. We're a mature industry. We know each other. It's a big industry, but a small industry. Pick your vendors carefully. Right.
Actually, a good segue into the next submitted question. I don't know whether you want to answer this, but you might say this is not related to screening, but
okay.
What questions should retailers ask their suppliers? How about manufacturers?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Yeah, what questions should retailers ask their suppliers?
Well, I give retailers a lot of kudos because a lot of retailers have already pushed back on their vendors to make sure that they take proper precautions to screen their merchandise. So retailers should ask all questions. Where are you getting your goods from? What are you doing in addition to what we're telling you? How are you protecting in all the different stages of manufacturing? I mean, feel free to ask all questions at this point.
We've got a question here about the proposed G7 sanctions. I'm minded to just change the question a little bit and just ask whether how do you think that whole process of G7 sanctions on Russian diamonds is going to affect demand for screening services? I mean, I guess it's really a very different element of screening.
Screening for origin or screening for what? What is?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what it would come down to is whether let's change the question a bit to, do you think could origin become part of diamond screening, or has it already become part of diamond screening?
I think people are trying to make it a more scientific approach, right? To find out where the material comes from, but I think it's still a work in progress. We do know that there are companies working on it to find out the true DNA of a stone, but I think it's, like I said, still a work in progress.
Right. Okay. Another question here. What kind of stones would go undetected with the currently available technology, in terms of size, color, clarity? I think the question here is getting at what type of lab-grown diamonds is there any type of lab-grown diamonds that are most likely to be missed by screening services?
I don't think lab growns would be missed.
Ones that don't get screened.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Usually we're always more on the lookout for the non-diamond material. Whatever, especially in the colorless, near colorless range. So, you always need to be on the lookout for, the colorless sapphires, lab-grown cubic zirconia, lab-grown moissanite, things of that nature.
The coated moissanite that we've seen.
Yes. Moissanite has been coated with lab-grown diamond material. So far, it doesn't seem to be a very prevalent product. on the market, at least from what we've seen here in New York.
Thankfully.
Right. It's kind of, I was going to ask a question about how, in what way screening is about more than just lab-grown diamonds. But I think you've really touched on this, is that there's non-diamond material, and we mentioned before there's treatments. What else can you say about that? What else is there about diamond screening that's not just about lab-grown? Steve,
at the end of the day, it's it's just about verification of what kind of merchandise you have.
Right. Okay. See if there's any more questions that came in. I think that's all there is for now. I just want to remind people that they can post questions rather in the video chat. But for now, I just want to say a big thank you to Avi and Steve for joining us today, and to all of you for watching and listening. I mentioned at the beginning that there will be some free content from IGI available at the end. Here is the link. It's just being posted in the comments right now. But don't leave us yet, because we are going to move on to some other questions that the audience submitted. There is one here. What is the minimum diamond size that you can screen? Have we touched on this yet? I'm not sure that we have.
No, I don't think we've touched on, we haven't touched on size. Here again, it just depends on what kind of equipment you have. Unfortunately, we have many pieces of equipment available to us. So, I mean, we have, gone down to, stones as small as half a point.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, we have screened larger.
Right. I assume there's a maximum though.
I mean, we caught the 6-carater. I have seen lab growns as large as 20 and 30 carats. So, definitely for sure, every size is being screened at IGI.
Right. And when another question that came in is about when people are screening themselves, so they're using machines. What are the mistakes that the most common mistakes that people make when they're screening stones themselves? I mean, I guess it's just about a case of correct operation of the equipment.
Yeah, I would think, for sure, correct operation of the equipment, and then just being aware that, certain testers, like we touched on before, certain testers just aren't up to date with technology to differentiate, say, between lab-grown moissanite and a HPHT-grown lab-grown diamond, just because of the chemical makeups of both stones.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. A question here also about, sorry, beg your pardon. Is it possible to miss any type of HPHT color-treated diamonds when checking?
Mm-hmm.
We've touched on these issues a little bit, but
it's a process. Fortunately, we have not missed it, as far as we know. Here again in New York, we haven't seen many HPHT treated natural diamonds. But of course, all the labs are aware that, the treatment still exists, and we're always on the lookout for it.
And this is a question for me, but how much demand do you see from people in the lab-grown industry wanting to check that their stones are so-called as-grown?
We have a few clients, right? We have, it's part of our protocol and enlisting it on our reports. So, the industry has kind of accepted it as part of the practice of receiving reports from IGI.
Okay. Interesting question here. Is there an established industry standard that gives the consumers confidence that the screening techniques and equipment used are up to standards? I guess the answer is the Assure project. But is there anything other than that? Not sure I'm aware of one.
Yeah, not to my knowledge either. But yeah, Project Assure is the most notable one out there for our trade.
Okay, great. Just looking through it to see if I've missed any questions. Here's one. What are the next steps for this sector? How do you see the sector developing, or how do you want the sector to develop?
But we don't really dictate how it's going to develop. We're just seeing the trend that it's becoming more of a trend. And we're trying to do everything that we can across 30 locations around the world to make it easy for any part of the supply chain to get their diamonds screened. Better to be sure, better to be safe than sorry later. So we're making it efficient. We're trying to turn it around in a quick manner. Prices are competitive. We're here to talk to you. We're here to listen. And we also speak to a lot of the growers periodically, if not more, to know what's going on their end, how their techniques are changing, how their processes are changing, how their recipes are evolving. You know, it's important for us to be involved with them as well, because they're the ones who are doing it every day as well.
Right. And also in terms of technological developments on your side, how is that likely to develop? How is technology to detect likely to develop and improve?
It's a constant for us. It's something almost daily. By the amount of stones and the amount of pieces of jewelry that we do, we have to kind of keep evolving and making sure that we have our eyes wide open and our technology keeps advancing. So it's something that we're diligently working on.
Great. Someone pointed out that we should explain what Project Assure is. That is the Natural Diamond Council's project to, I guess, test and benchmark all the various detection instruments for detecting lab grown.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that covers all the questions that we've got in. So I just wanted to again thank Avi and Steve for enlightening us about diamond screening. We've heard a lot today about how it works, why it's needed. I think it's been a useful session, certainly for me, but also for all of you watching. And just a reminder that the free content from IGI is available at the link being posted again right now, in case you missed it before, just in the comments. This episode of Gem Talks was sponsored by IGI. I hope you've all enjoyed, and wishing you all a good rest of the day.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks all. Thanks for all the good questions too.